this has been kind of my futile attempt at transferring everything that has been shared with us, all of the knowledge from all of these amazing women. It doesn't do justice to all of this content to kind of marginalize it into a unit. And so I've kind of gathered these ideas that this really, for me, would work to just lay a foundation throughout my whole school year, to continue to reaffirm these ancestral, these traditional ways of sharing knowledge, these traditional ways of relating to each other. So, but for the purpose of this project, I kind of broke it down into a four-week plan. On one side are some of the themes that I would like to begin with. So, for example, I would begin with talking about the origins of writing. Professor Ron kind of gave me some ideas about how we even begin to discuss where writing came from, right? And I think I would provide some historical context for my students and just kind of enlighten them on why and how Mesoamerica is one of the cradles of writing, right? Man and women began to do what we now consider writing in this place that a lot of my students come from. And so, I would use codices, stone carvings, stela as they call them, to talk about and to begin that conversation, and definitely point out the language diversity that Mexico has, the diversity that they come with, to let them know that it's appreciated and it's something that we need to preserve within this very Eurocentric system of education that we have to navigate as people of color. So we also would talk about why codices were burned, right? Why these original forms of writing were then destroyed, and why it's important that we now continue to use writing as a powerful way of expressing our stories. I will touch on Ricardo Flores Magón, example, and these would just then be kind of scaled to either 6th grade or 7th or 8th grade learners. So what kind of value is this for future generations, for us to leave behind our stories? What lessons did our ancestors leave us with, from the codices to stone carvings? I like to incorporate some artistic activities in my writing to then use writing for the students to reflect like that artistic process that they go through, because that helps me when I read some of the things they write, understand like how they creatively work and possibly be a better, hold some better prompts for them to then write to. So I took your idea of them creating like their own symbol to decipher something that's important in their culture. Transition into week 2, Mesoamerica, Cosmología Mesoamerica, talking about the calendar counting system and how these civilizations kind of understood their place in the world in relation to not only material things, but also the celestial, the underworld, and how does that contrast with the way that our students now relate to each other as men, women, men and men, women and women, men to other, etc. Kind of giving them a larger perspective of how the way we always relate to living things and each other is not always natural, right? And there was other ways of doing things. Where I give them a series of Nahuatl terms that a lot of them they would already understand: coyote, moli, chapulín, right, umali, to then kind of show them that they already know a lot of Nahuatl without realizing it. Week 3 would then take us into this conversation around movement and migration, and kind of trying to show them the historical movement, right, of people in this part of the world. I would want to talk about the difference between movement for resources or survival versus movement for colonization, right? And how do we understand that as young people who are labeled immigrants, or our parents labeled illegal immigrants, right? What comes from us when we see it in more of a historical timeline. talking about migration, obviously, borders versus boundaries, and the power of words. I've had some great conversations with some of y'all about how powerful words are in the way we talk about things like movement and migration, and how sometimes we, without knowing it, subconsciously perpetuate systems of oppression. It's kind of using theater of the oppressed is a school of thought that also comes from the Paulo Freire school. And so I would like role play the arrival of Cortés and his relationship with Moctezuma. And what happens in forum theater is the audience kind of observes a scenario of oppression, and they then are able to point it out and suggest different decisions and different actions that the actors could have taken on to get rid of that oppression, right, or to change the outcome. And so it would be interesting for them to see how did Cortés and Moctezuma relate to each other, and what kind of ideas would they have had that might have changed the outcome of the genocide of indigenous peoples. Right? Last thing would lead us to our narrative, right, and having students really start to put forth their personal stories, hopefully after several weeks of thought, of dialogue, of Socratic seminars, and really working with each other to unwrap these things. Students can then put forth a migration story, either themselves or their own, or a family member's, complete with the legacy of their culture, and basically this idea of escribir para resistir, right, which is something that I've learned now these last few weeks, is that people use writing as a way to not only tell a story, but to also resist the oncoming onslaught of their destruction of their cultural legacy. And that would be, those would be kind of like the guideline for the narrative. You can see it there for yourself. The question that we would want to come to is migration a human right, and how do we play that out, and how do we navigate again the systems and the people who are not allowing us to continue to move and be together, right, as community.